The Software Leaders Uncensored podcast, where tech leaders grow beyond the code.
You're listening to Software Leaders Uncensored, the no-fluff podcast for tech execs who are done with buzzwords and BS. I'm Steve Taplin, CEO, serial entrepreneur, currently writing my second book about what I've learned about building 30 ventures, having 20 failures and 10 wins. I've taken companies public, franchised nationwide, raised tens of millions of dollars, but every company I did was powered by one thing: custom software. Now through my company Sononify Technology, I help tech leaders scale engineering teams. Each episode, I sit down with real software leaders to unpack what's working, what's broken, and how to build what matters. So let's dive in. Today, we have a fun guest. I'm excited about this. Joe Emison out of Columbus, Ohio. Joe is an engineer turned CTO turned founder and is currently co-founder and CTO of Branch Insurance, where they have successfully raised over $230 million to date. Joe, excited to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Joe, give our listeners a fast-track version of your career.
Happy to. When I was young, I wanted to be Judge Wapner, and I was on a path to law school. And when I was a teenager, I very much wanted to be in the real world and have real responsibilities and authority and be held accountable. And it turns out you're not allowed to do that in the law until you've gone to law school and passed the bar. And so I found my way into software development because, there's a great New Yorker cartoon that says, on the internet, it doesn't matter if you're a dog, or no one knows if you're a dog. And it turned out, being 14 years old, nobody cared. I could truly build software, make money. I was treated like an adult, which was what I was looking for.
So you started coding at age 14?
I actually started coding at age 12, but I started selling my software at age 14.
Wow.
And I wrote bulletin board door games was the first thing. Shareware, people would mail me checks. I would get them in a P.O. box. I would mail back a code. It was actually a time in which, because I couldn't take credit cards because I was too young, but I could take payment via 900 number. So you actually could call a 900 number and instantly buy my, you'd get a code, and then you'd dial up my bulletin board and put in the code, and then I would give you the registration code for your software.
Amazing.
So it was great. So I continued doing this, making money, college admissions essays, went to college, applied to law school, and went to law school, started working for a law firm in the summer, and realized, I should start companies as a technical co-founder, not be a lawyer. And so I did get my JD, so I didn't, drop out of law school. I finished college, I finished law school, but I had started a couple companies in the interim, and then, went after I stopped going to law school, I was full-time into starting companies. And so I've started 6 companies as a co-founder. In all cases, the technical co-founder, but I've also been the CEO a couple times.
Okay. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and 4 of them have sold, and so at least as of the time that I left them, they were profitable or sort of thereabouts, and so yeah.
You're at 6 at bats with 4 wins. Your batting average was only 333.
I'm still basically with the remaining 2. I mean,
okay.
I would call it one of them. One of them went into bankruptcy after I left. The acquirer went into bankruptcy. It was the only thing bought out of the bankruptcy. And then that company was a real estate firm that got hit really hard by COVID and then decided not to invest in it anymore. They still own it, but they're not.
If it counts as a win from the entrepreneurial playbook, if you made money when you sold it. If they screwed it up after that's fair enough. Fair enough. Fast track us. How did you have the idea of Branch Insurance, and how did you pivot that way in your career?
I've started a number of companies myself on my own ideas, but those I have tended to have been a solopreneur, or they've been very small and bootstrapped. Every time I've raised outside capital, it's because someone who I've known in some walk of life has come to me with an idea that I thought was great. And so Branch is no exception. I had started a company in insurance selling data to insurance called BuildFacts that was acquired by a public company called Veris. And I met my first my first big customer. And then also he later went to work for Verisk, and we did a joint venture that ended up becoming the acquisition. He approached me and said, hey, I can't sleep. I've got this idea for really solving the kind of the biggest problem in US personal lines insurance, which is that bundled, most people own homes, own cars, and bundle to some extent their insurance. But and they will retain for like 20 years. But over the 20-year period, they will spend, the insurance companies on their behalf will spend about half, close to half of all of the dollars they pay in on things that are not paying claims. And in fact, they'll spend something like 25, 30% on just acquiring new customers. So
Okay.
you're a customer, you're going to retain for 20 years, and like, a quarter to a third of the money you pay in is just going out the door to acquire new customers. And that's a pretty inefficient financial instrument in the modern era of smartphones and the internet and data and software. But it's a very hard, for many reasons, it's very hard to crack. And I had personally been looking for a large market challenge.
Okay.
And he is one of the smartest, kindest people I've ever worked with. And I was like, this would be great. I would love to start a business with you. And you have this expertise in insurance, and I buy it, and let's go do it.
So tell us more about the problem Branch Insurance is solving. Is this for the insurance companies, for the consumers, for both?
So Branch is an insurance company.
Okay.
So it's solving what is fundamentally a consumer problem. And you can think of there as being like a number of consumer problems in insurance, but think of two primarily. One of them is that insurance is so painful to buy as a consumer that people don't really shop it. So you could theoretically shop your insurance, but the general experience of like, I need to buy home and auto insurance is you'll get one price. You'll go one place, get some price that works, and you're like, I'll just buy that because that took hours and days and weeks and months, and like I just can't handle it, and I don't know enough about it, and I just frustrate. And so that experience is very difficult, and that experience is why every other ad on TV is for insurance. It's because people, don't want to go shop a bunch of carriers, and so you want to be like top of mind when people think I need insurance so that you can be the one that they're going to. And so, and then again, all of this money spent on acquisition means that the cost of insurance is higher than it needs to be. And so it is theoretically possible for insurance to be very easy to buy and to cost significantly less if the insurance carrier just doesn't spend as much money on acquisition.
Gotcha. So that's what the ecosystem you created does. Is that right?
So what we have done is we have created the ability to buy in a home, auto, even umbrella insurance in like a couple minutes. And it's bound. It's like a single call close. So from a technological standpoint, from an experience standpoint, it is far different from any other carrier that's in the US. And then we are in the process of leveraging that technology to get into acquisition channels where you can buy us and not have to pay for this big acquisition load. So for example, if we go to a traditional set of channels to sell this, it's a lot easier to buy. But if we have to spend $1 billion on ads, we got to pass that on. Right. So the places where this is most efficient are where you are already in talking to someone who is doing a transaction that requires insurance. So one of the most obvious ones is you're buying a new home and you're getting a mortgage. And so if you're buying a new home and you're getting a mortgage, then in that scenario, you need insurance because you don't live there. You can't bring your insurance with you. You are going to have to get insurance. And so we're a partner with Rocket Mortgage, and Rocket Mortgage will continue to us, and we can get you insured, in no time. It's just minutes. And that's the capability that's magic. Because in a traditional insurer, if they partner, it's like, oh, well, if you're Rocket Mortgage, you're like, I'll send you over there for 2 hours and you probably still won't need insurance at the end of it, right? So, and it will not have a cost benefit. But if we get these tight partner integrations, we have this cost benefit because we can take the price down, because in that relationship, we are not having to pay anything else other than what is a very small amount of money relative to what is usually paid for acquisition.
Amazing. And I'm looking forward to getting under the hood on how you've been able to architect the company to accomplish this, because insurance is a painful, regulated, challenging area. Before we do that, though, tell us about your book, Serverless as a Game Changer.
Sure. I've been very interested my entire career in how to be a more efficient and effective software developer. And I've had these moments in my life where I have realized how ignorant practitioners of software development are about how to be good at software development. And a big cause of that, I believe, is that there's no continuing education in IT at all, but certainly not in software development, which is wild to me because if you want to be a realtor, you have to do a certain number of hours of continuing education every year. But I bet you, if I took a realtor from 1950 and I dropped them in today and I said, sell a house or buy a house, that realtor would be able to do so ethically, not violate any laws, and be good at it. But I promise you, if I took a software developer from 1950 and dropped them in today, they would be absolutely useless. They couldn't do anything.
No doubt. It's ever changing, and especially over the past 2 years with generative AI, it's been a moving target.
And we get, I would say, throughout the last 30 years, which is my career so far in software development, every 18 to 24 months, there's been a meaningful improvement change that helps us build software more effectively for or at least the software we're being asked to build. And yet, what actually happens is people when they first learn to develop, a lot of times like college age, they learn kind of new, exciting, cool tooling. They get brought into some company or they start developing and they use certain tools, maybe as a solo developer, to build certain things. And then those are successful and they keep using those. And there's no one forcing them to learn anything. And so you have this problem where people who have a lot of experience don't understand anything modern, don't understand any modern benefit. And it tends to be the case if you know a thing, you know a certain way of doing software development, and there's you get that 2-year or 4-year later benefits. It takes some effort to understand them. It's different. And so most people are they spend 10 minutes, they look at them and they come up with some justification as to why they're not very good. And then they stick with their old way.
So is this the challenge your book hits, Serverless as a Game Changer?
Yep. So fundamentally, when we have these new improvements, nobody adopts them. And so we have had, or very few people adopt them, and they're thought of as toys, and we get a hype cycle, right? There's for a little while, there's a lot of interest. Ooh, this is exciting. It's going to change everything. People then don't understand how to use them. They use them incorrectly. In particular, they will use old patterns or patterns that they're used to and sort of try to project them onto the new technology and build them in a certain way. That will be frustrating. And they will be, no, that's crap. We're not going to use it. And so with serverless, we're at a really interesting moment today where AWS Lambda, which sort of arguably kicks off serverless, although I would date the history of serverless to Firebase and Parse, really circa 2012. Or you could even think of as Heroku a little bit, Google App Engine. We're talking about things more than 10 years ago. We have a hype cycle in which basically software developers said, oh, I've got an application. An application is broken into functions or could be broken into functions. Oh, I get it. I write a separate Lambda function for every function in my application. Please don't do that. That will create a terrible, unmaintainable piece of garbage. And so, but predictably, no continuing education, no real desire to learn new things, in my experience, for the average sort of senior software developer, average VP engineering, just not interested in actually learning new things. I know a thing, I've gotten paid for it, that's my identity. Let me look at the new thing and let me find a reason why it's bad. And so we live in a world in which it is possible to do absolutely incredible things if you build serverlessly, if you understand what that means to build serverlessly, but yet people don't every day. And so Branch spends 1/30th. So that's 3% or 97% less than any comparable company founded at the same time that has the same coverage. In fact, similar companies founded around the time Branch was founded or before Branch was founded spend around $60 million a year on technology and development. Branch spends about 3,
Wow.
right? 2.5 to 3, and is in more states and sells more lines of business and does more. Also, Branch doesn't have internal IT operations. Branch only has developers, and Branch's developers are all full stack developers, despite the fact that the majority of Branch developers' first job was working for Branch. We've run our own boot camp. And so we've got ex-welders, ex-property managers working at Branch, okay? We've been able to do all of this because of the stack.
So
this is what the book talks about.
I do want to jump into Branch and your engineering team, and it sounds like it's intertwined with the book. When did you write this book?
I wrote the book between like 2020 and 2023. It came out in 2023, in October 2023.
Gotcha. So that book is your lessons of building multiple companies and the right way to take advantage of serverless to stay up to date as software developers. Is that a fair summary?
It's largely how to think about serverless software development. So it is what is it and how does it give you massive business benefits?
Amazing. I know that our listeners will be interested in that book. Let's jump into Branch, and as you started to do, but let's talk about your engineering team. And you were starting to say how you bred them. How many engineers are on your team today?
Today we have 15.
Okay, and you said they're all full stack.
So we largely hire front end developers and we make full stack developers because serverless enables, at least building the way we do, enables making full stack developers fairly simple if you understand front end development.
And you're even taking people without programming backgrounds and breeding them through your company. And I take it you've had very good success turning those people with the right mindset into software developers.
I would say decent success. It is certainly not, I would say for every 20 people who take a boot camp, maybe one of them will make it all the way through to like a true career path track within 2-3 years of learning. It's not, there are no miracles here. But it's certainly possible, and we have done it. And again, we started by hiring people in college or people who were just finishing boot camps.
Now, are you guys an in-office or remote environment?
We have both.
Okay, so your engineering team, how do you run that? Are they primarily on-prem, or they spend a couple days a week in office, or is it?
I would say they're primarily working from home, but come into the office with some regularity.
Okay, gotcha. And have you seen that, getting that in-person time on a regular basis? It is definitely more challenging in the remote environment in building culture and making sure you're constantly innovating.
Yeah, I don't actually find it to be harder. I think that it's different. And I think there are a lot of people who have confused different with harder.
Fair enough.
I'll just give the example that I give all the time when I'm on panels or I'm talking with people who are like, well, you can't possibly build culture the right way as well, not being in office. I would just give the example of there's this really interesting application for Slack called Donut. And all it does is it arranges random meetings between people in your organization. And it forces you to end it. They're not work related. So you're just supposed to meet. And I can tell you after running Donut for quite a while, I can tell you that I think it actually forges much better and different and more cross-company empathetic connections than being in office. Because being in office, if you think about it, being in office is about largely seeing a lot of the same people who you get comfortable with, who you can maybe randomly are situated near or you end up in meetings with. And it tends to create more cliques and monoculture. There's an interesting aspect of Donut, and there's an interesting aspect of what you're able to do remotely that is actually much, much healthier than what ordinarily happens in office culture.
Interesting perspective. And we're avid Slack users, and we use Donut as well. That is a great tool for helping remote cultures, to say the least. I appreciate your input on that. Talk about, your ideal tech stack, with your strategy of serverless and how you go about that.
So I'm a strong believer in using TypeScript for front end and back end. And I just don't know why anybody would pick anything different for your average web or mobile app today. Uh, Having shared packages between front and back end is absolutely amazing. Having the same language in front and back end creates enormous efficiencies. TypeScript is a great language. It's really well supported by kind of everything. React is a phenomenal framework for small and large teams. I find most of the people who complain about React have never worked in like large teams and have had to support things at scale over time with average developers. React is really phenomenal for that. And every sort of, Vue is fine. I think there are these other frameworks, but React just works wonderfully there. In terms of like backend as a service, so I'm going to use serverless backends. We at Branch use what I call the CLAD stack, which would be Cognito, Lambda, AppSync, and Dynamo. I think it's a phenomenal stack. It's somewhat complicated. It's not the easiest initial setup. And so I also do like Firebase and Firestore and the Google Cloud. I think it's good. But, for more kind of enterprise applications, I like the CLAD stack. But for solopreneur, sort of small bootstrap stuff, I think Firebase Firestore is fantastic. So those are my ideal stacks. And then on the mobile app side, I would use Ionic with React, which I get a little worried about Ionic with out systems ownership of it, but in my experience, it's been a lot better than React Native. React Native has like very large chunks of things that are very poorly supported, and Ionic allows you to run that pure React application in a mobile app and with native code in a way that is just simpler and better.
So I often joke, you do it wrong enough, long enough, you figure out how to do it right. How did you evolve to this ideal tech stack as a guy who's been coding since he's 12 years old and making money coding since 14?
Yeah, and I built in like Borland Delphi, Borland C++ builder. My first language was Turbo Pascal. I built a lot in Perl and PHP and Python, Ruby on Rails, PHP, Laravel. I've built a lot of things in a lot of languages. I have like core principles that I think are the most effective and most efficient. And this is a lot of what I write about in the book as well. But, what I am looking for is how do I have a consistent, how can everything be in the same language? How can we share code? And then one thing I really love about the CLAD stack and AppSync and GraphQL in particular is that, and Dynamo, is that you define a schema in GraphQL and that sits in the middle in your API. And that is your object schema. And then that schema automatically is what's going to get used in the front end because you're going to use a GraphQL library and you're going to go get the data as objects as they're defined in the schema. And in the back end, especially if you're sharing the same packages, right, and it's the same language, it's going to be the same object there. And then you're going to write that object to Dynamo. You're not using a relational database. You're going to write it as a key value store or as a document database. And so what that means is there's no transformation. So what most senior developers will choose as a stack today is like, well, I'm going to use Ruby on Rails or Python with the Postgres, and then I'm going to have like an API layer, I'm going to have a front end layer. And what that means is every layer, database to backend to API to front end, is a bunch of transformation. All of that is just friction. It's just friction added complexity. Why? Why would you do that? And so if you can pick a stack where literally there's no data transformation, the core data model is everywhere, and all of your utility functions in the front and the back end can be in shared packages, like you will have cut out such a tremendous amount of time. Also, this stack it all scales to zero, right? So at Branch, every developer and every environment has his or its own copy of production. So literally, all these things get defined in CloudFormation files. You deploy them, and a developer environment costs like 50 cents a month, but it's totally isolated. So no developer can break any other developer's environment. There's no, dev is broken because this person did it, or the build got broken in this way by this person. Like, it doesn't happen. Everything's isolated. Everything's really cheap. We run a full stack insurance company. Our Amazon bill for that stack is less than $10,000 a month. And those sort of like prepayment reserve pricing, nothing special, just like, rack rate pricing, right? And the BuildFax, a company I started in 2008, also built on Amazon. It's when we reached nowhere near the amount of traffic that Branch has, we were like $35,000 a month. I mean, and it had nowhere near the benefits, and you had just dev, staging, and prod, and all those things. So yeah, I mean, largely what I care about is if software is eating the world, then companies that can effectively build software are going to be the ones who are going to win. So how do I pick a stack that enables that kind of rapid output, rapid software development? How do I hit my DORA metrics better by picking a stack? And I do realize that the authors of Accelerate say in Accelerate, if you don't know Accelerate, it's a phenomenal book. I mean, anyone listening to this should get that book. That's more important than my book. But in that book, they say it doesn't matter what stack you write. You just have to hit these metrics. And you can think of my book as saying, I agree with what Accelerate said, except they're wrong. The stack does matter. And if you pick the right stack, you will get even further accelerants. And it will be easier for you to hit these DORA metrics if you pick the right stack.
Interesting. So many times I see that the tech stack was either inherited or just because that's what the leaders at the time knew. So that's why they picked it, not necessarily the right stack. And I love your passion around that. That's amazing. Now, you're operating in an industry of insurance that is not known for being agile. It's highly regulatory. How have you worked through these challenges from an engineering perspective, an industry that's not quick to evolve from its rigidity?
I mean, the good news about how regulation exists in insurance around technology is that it is not as prescriptive. It's come late to insurance, and it's not as prescriptive as it can be, which is great. It is more principles based. So we have not run into any problem in insurance, well, save one of our data vendors that required that we have a physical office with a lockable door. That was like an important audit criteria. I mean, we were never going to store anything in paper anywhere, but like they needed that, right? And a shredder. So we bought those and we had them, and they looked at them and they said, yep, you get to buy credit data, So like, other than that, though, the requirements are sensical and they're much easier to meet with the stack that we have. So we have no physical servers, we have no VMs, we have no containers, we have no internal network. And so as a result, sometimes when we get audited, there is confusion about how could you exist without an internal network. Like we've had people come and say, we need to see that you have a DMZ. We're like, well, we don't. Identity is a perimeter. But we've never had a problem helping people understand these things. And what I can tell you is, more than any other company I've started, when we meet and talk about what we're doing for information security and what we're doing around like data privacy, we don't have to say, here's our list of projects we have to do because of the regulations. We meet all of them. We get to say, what are the real risks? Security theater, we've accomplished those things and they weren't hard. So we actually get to say, what are the real risks that we have and how do we mitigate them? And so we have a lot of freedom with respect to how we address information security and data privacy. And we get to actually tackle the things that we think are real.
Amazing, Joe. I can't think of another CTO in the insurance industry that can talk with such clarity around these things. So hats off to you. That's fantastic. Certainly right now, every CTO out there is facing the challenge of AI right now. What's your take? Are LLMs hype, game changers, something in between?
I think we are the insurance carrier, the personalized insurance carrier in the US that has the most AI in production today, as far as I know. We use AI. If you file a first notice of loss and you call us up, you will get a voice AI. The letters that are drafted, initial drafts of letters, a lot of our letters are automatically drafted by AI using LLMs. We use LLMs heavily when we do software development. There's a great software coding agent called Devlo, DEVLO.ai, that we use that does small PRs and does great code review for us. They're fantastic. So we do a lot. We experiment a lot. We've probably done about 30 tests that haven't made it to production. We use AI in automated underwriting as well, especially in image interpretation. What I would say is that I think a lot of what I read today about AI is like silly hype. I think a lot of it is just not founded by what's real. I think that the idea that, there's some quotes attributed to like, Mark Benioff or like Satya Nadella that's like, or Mark Zuckerberg, like 80% of our development that was done by junior developers can now be done by AI. Like, I just, that's just.
Made a bold comment last week that within 5 years, he thinks he'll be able to get rid of 60% of his developer. I actually wrote an article calling bullshit on.
I just like anyone who's actually used this, any of these. There's absolutely no evidence that that would be the case. I'm very interested in. We test a lot, and certainly, let's put it this way: I don't do any software development without Windsurf today. And we do a lot. We ask Devlo to do a lot of like small developments. But I would say, about half and I've gotten pretty used to what these things are what's possible with them. I would say about half the time Windsurf, I'm disappointed by what it does. But about half the time it is very helpful.
Like on testing or on documentation, those are clear areas that it helps. And we use Windsurf as well. And I like what you said, probably 50% of the time you're like, oh man, but it still does help that other 50%.
It does. And it's very cheap for what it is. I often tell people, certainly when I talk to like investors or a board, I say, there are two things I think LLMs are fantastic at. One of them is natural language processing, really great. And two is they're great at summarizing large amounts of content. And when you have those two things together, that is also very powerful. Natural language ability to like get information about large amounts of information. Those are great. And I think that, when I think about the way I use Windsurf and what we're doing repetitive rote programming tasks, maybe where there's like a little bit too much repetition in the code, like they're great at that. And so I'm happy. I like it. I keep digging into more, but I do find that the vast majority of sort of breathless commentary on them are from people who don't know what they're talking about.
So, Joe, you're like the superhero of engineers, and as far as what you've accomplished throughout your career, how you've gone from engineer to co-founder to company raising hundreds of millions of dollars, disrupting an industry. What advice do you have for others, whether they're engineers or CTOs still trying to figure it out? What advice do you have for those people today to get where you are and where you're going?
I don't know if where I am is the place where anybody else should be. I'm happy about it. I would say I think the best career advice that I wish I had early on was do work with companies, with organizations, live in places that are growing. Growth creates surplus wealth that gets shared. If you are in a zero-sum environment, or even worse, a shrinking environment, people are going to be mean to each other. You're not going to get opportunities, and there is a shrinking pie. And so the best thing you can do is find something that's growing, live in a place that's growing, be around people who are growing, because that creates empathy is easier, and learning is easier, and there's just lots of stuff to do, and you get to make choices. And so in that environment, you get given things, you get good at them. Things keep growing. You need to hire people. You get to hire people, and you get to pick the things you want to do, and you keep those things, and you hand off the things you don't want to do, at least to some extent. And like that's it. You want to find growth because growth is magic. And if you're not at growth, you should find growth.
I think that's incredible advice, Joe. Thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. Excited to see how you continue to shape the next chapter of Branch, the insurance industry at large. Any final shout outs or advice you'd like to give?
I would again say read Accelerate, Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble. That book is great even if you're not technical. That's the most important book ever written about software development. And then after that, you should read Team Topologies, the second best book about organizing people. And then third, you should get my book, Serverless as a Game Changer.
All right. We love it. Thanks, Joe. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin, CEO, author, and builder of over 30 ventures powered by custom software. If this episode sparked something, share it, subscribe, or send it to somebody in the trenches. Stay bold and keep building. Thank you.